I think one reason the debates about Christian nationalism get so confusing, I think people get offended because they think, well, how dare you question what I grew up with? I mean, Justin, I was thinking about this. I grew up pledging allegiance to the U.S. flag, clapping for veterans in parades, thinking America is a pretty great place to live. So I'm just wondering, what's a view of what view should Christians have? Was that wrong of me to have that attitude? What is patriotism supposed to look like?
That's a good question. I mean, I too grew up pledging allegiance to the flag. I've been to parades where there were veterans and we clapped for those veterans. My grandfather was a veteran. But I also grew up being called the N-word in school and having teachers that didn't want to address it. Seeing that a lot of black kids, including myself in my school, were summarily placed into, slow learning classes when they really shouldn't have been. Hearing my elders talk about what they went through when it came to Jim Crow and my grandfather's father being killed, during that time. And so there was this tension, right? So to answer your question, no, what you were feeling right then wasn't necessarily bad, but it wasn't the whole story.
Not representative of the full story. I was getting in there. I mean, I'll just give you one example. I mean, Reconstruction, I think, is the most perilous period of American history, especially in how the narrative is told. We're actually working on an article on this, on the lost cause and things like that for the Gospel Coalition. But I do remember when I can go back through my textbooks, in rural South Dakota, the textbooks taught me a lost cause narrative of Reconstruction.
And that's what I was getting to. It's one thing to have that feeling at the parade and all those things. I too cheer for the U.S. and will tell my sons to do so during the Olympics, right? There's something to that. There's nothing wrong with that. The question is, when you go to school, are you really learning the full American history? It's been surprising to me. I used to assume people understood the history because I was taught the history from my elders, but a lot of people don't know American history, right? If you don't know about Black Wall Street, if you don't know about how Black veterans after going to war for their country were excluded from the GI Bill, if you don't know about redlining, you might want to go back and look up American history. And I think one very good place to go is Reconstruction. I mean, Reconstruction tells a very important story that I'm not sure that we have all of it. So not only school, though, I mean, once you have the story that you had, do you go to your church? And is your church also just upholding that narrative instead of challenging that narrative and showing us the sin in our system along with the sin in ourselves? This becomes the real question that we have to address. The problem isn't that you might feel good about something that is imperfect. The issue is, do you know that it's imperfect, and have you really studied it to understand that? So again, I would say that we have some very excellent examples of ways that we've achieved, and then we have some things that we really have to work on. And if we only stay on one side of that conversation, we miss all the other history that can inform us and help us actually correct some of the mistakes that we made in the past. So I don't have the problem with people having a feeling of patriotism. Does that patriotism force you to try to build and maintain this false narrative? Or is it strong enough to say, like Frederick Douglass, this system is good enough to try to build something out of? It has the mechanisms in place for us to make it better, but I have to admit there's some problems in order to make it better.